you don't have to have it. It's a question of context, meaning you are wired to be a warrior because you don't experience dopamine. You have a serotonin dysregulation. So you're like high functioning anxiety, drive, and you're working 9 to 5 in an office.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on this podcast, I have a very special guest, a good friend of mine. We've been on stage together, we've been in summits together, and he really knows his stuff. We're talking about the power of knowing our DNA. And if we have this roadmap, what it could actually do to understand ourselves at a different level and understand the context in the things that we do in life, whether it be taking a supplement, performing a certain behavioral action. It would give us a roadmap to live the life we were designed for from our DNA. Now, before we dive into that conversation, I want to welcome in anybody who's new to the podcast. If you are new to the Thrive State Podcast, welcome. I am your host, and this podcast is really about you. It's really about rediscovering who you are and how you can best thrive. And so we bring together thought leaders, experts, physicians, people that are deep in their space to give you the tools, the knowledge, the tactics, the habits for you to become the best version of you. So do us a favor, subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends and family, because when you do, you'll give them the access to do the same. If you are returning to this podcast, I just want to thank you, because the 2 years we've been on, we've been exponentially growing. This podcast has really led to opportunities such as a reality TV show, keynote speaking at the biohacking conference, and a lot of stages around the world. So I want to thank you. You loyal listeners have really been a big part of the show's growth. And if you haven't already, please consider doing us a favor, is leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. That's going to continue to amplify this message more and more. And if you haven't already, pick up the second edition of my book, Thrive State, at thrivestatebook.com. I really give additional information as to how you become your best self. What are the things that are actually stopping you in life? Like, you want this goal, you want health, you want vitality, and we know we have to adopt new ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving to get them. We come up with these New Year's resolutions every year. Why don't we follow through on them? There's a biological and scientific basis as to why that happens. And when you can understand that, you can make any goal your reality. We go over that in the second edition. What we also talk about is how, as human beings, we're wirelessly connected to each other and start and feel each other's energetic state. Just as much as fear can go across a community, so can love, so can joy and connection and gratitude. And so when we are more aware of our state, if we happen to be in relationships and teams and organizations and businesses, we can allow that energetic to permeate in those places. So, I work with, people in the entertainment space, CEOs in large corporations. I also work with organizations itself, really to bring the state of health, of happiness, of human potential to more people in the world. And I go through all this in the second edition of my book, Thrive State. It was a #1 bestseller on Amazon. You could pick it up on Amazon or at thrivestatebook.com or wherever books are sold. But now to this conversation. I really like talking to friends of mine and dive into questions that I didn't know before, because you don't think to ask some of these personal questions. Kashif has been a friend of mine. We've actually been in a lot of wellness longevity conferences before. We've spoken on the same stages before. And so I've gotten a chance to know him as a friend, but I didn't get to know some of his backstory. So it was just really fun to be able to get to know him a little bit better, find out that this guy's a pretty hilarious guy, but he's also brilliant. And if you don't know who he is, he's actually the CEO and founder of the DNA company, where personalized medicine is being pioneered through unique insights into the human genome. That after you understand your human genome, you'll understand basically your blueprint or how you were made up. And if you could be in the environment, or if you could create an environment where you best thrive, you can start to heal a lot in your life, whether it be sleep problems, weight issues, mood issues like anxiety, like worry, like depression. You'll really get a better understanding of maybe why you don't get certain results in your life. And if so, what needs to be changed so you can get that. Understanding our genetic makeup gives us clues to the changes in life we can make so that we can get the results that we want. Now, we always talk about how it's not always your genetics, that how we live our life actually controls the interplay of our realities. That if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, it's really the genes mixed in with our choices that create that. And if you understand your genes at a deeper level, you can make more precise changes to how you live your life so that you can be your best medicine. And just a little bit more about Kashif. He was actually born in Vancouver, Canada, an immigrant household where he actually developed an industrial spirit very early. You know, at the age of 10, look at this hard worker. At the age of 10 or so, he actually applied to McDonald's, tried to get a job there. Nobody would hire him. And so he went ahead and he started to mow lawns. That was the start of his entrepreneurial experience. And you'll get to know the journey in which took him from that entrepreneur to helping lots of companies around the world to actually founding and being a guinea pig and champion for knowing your genetic information. So as the CEO of the DNA company, he really dove in the field of functional genomics. And it was revealed to him after learning his DNA how he was neurologically wired, which actually gave him the ability to make changes in his life so that he can actually improve, because he was going through depression, anxiety, and worry, and making simple shifts to his own life, asking the question why he feels that way. And they were able to find genetic clues as to his inability to detoxify certain things in the environment. After he was able to fix a few of those things, he noticed big changes in his life. You know, he gives us the story of how knowing your genetic makeup can give you a sense of how you sleep at night, because there are different types of sleep issues, but how, based on your genes, you can make certain life changes to actually improve that outcome you want in your life. After getting to know him over the last couple of years, seeing him at conferences, I can't be more proud that he's launching his book, The DNA Way. I recommend you all get a copy because it really gives the everyday person the knowledge and the tools and the power you have in knowing your genetic makeup. I think you're going to find this conversation super interesting. We dive in deep in how our genetic makeup actually affects our mental health, since May is Mental Health Month. But knowing your genes will give you an idea of what your sleep might be like, whether or not you're overweight, your tendencies for addiction or not. So I think you will have just as much fun and be educated in this special episode of the Thrive State podcast with my friend, Kashif Kien, or as I like to call him, Cash Can. My friend Cash Can is on the Thrive State podcast. Welcome, brother.
It's an honor, man. Good to be with you again.
We play a lot in the sandbox together. We've been at biohacking conferences together, summits together, and now I'm really happy to be able to shed some light on the important work that you're doing. Your book is going to be launching on May 16th that I want people to come by. I can't wait to get into this conversation, brother.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Yeah, last time I saw you was at, I think, the biohacking conference, and you walked by and shoved some vitamin D in my mouth. It was like liposomal liquid stuff, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll see how it goes.
So now that you know, you get to know the little quirks about, if you're good friends with me, what I'll end up doing to you is like shoving some biohacking tool in your presence. But before we get into the podcast, there's a segment of the show called the 5 to Thrive. Game show
Okay.
style, because as a kid, I always wanted to be a game show host. So game show style, the answers are meant to be 30 seconds long or less.
Okay.
1,000 points per each question, 5 questions. And if you win, you get a healthy meal that is compliant with your DNA on me. So are you ready to play the 5
Come
to
on,
Thrive?
man. You better ship it on ice. It's got to come all the way from California to Toronto.
You know it. Okay, question number 1. What
All right.
was your first job?
So I couldn't get a job. I applied at McDonald's, Burger King, and where all my friends worked, and I couldn't even get an interview. So I went and saved up money from wherever I could borrow it from, bought a lawnmower, and started a lawn mowing business. And I became an entrepreneur at like 12.
Oh, wow. Well, you tried to work at McDonald's at 12, which is why you couldn't get the interview, my friend. I'm pretty sure. I mean, there's laws like that in America, but I'm pretty sure Canadians follow the same age restrictions.
Yeah, we're talking about way back when you could forge paperwork, and get away with it.
Sounds good. Question number 2. What is one thing on your bucket list that you want to finish in the next 2 years of your life?
Oh man. Well, I want to take all of what we've learned
Yep.
in terms of how to reverse chronic disease
Yep.
and get into genetic therapy. So I want to take what the pharma world is doing wrong and fix it.
Look at you. That's a very nerdy bucket list item. All right. You know what? I'm going to ask that question again. It can't be related to science or genomics. Bucket list item. Go ahead. The next thing.
Okay, another bucket list item. Let's see. One thing I've been wanting to do that I haven't is I need to ski
Uh-huh.
in Utah, Denver, that whole area. I grew up in Vancouver, so I grew
Yeah.
up on Whistler Mountain.
Mm.
And I've just heard that the snow in that neighborhood is like lighter and fluffier than anything you've seen. So I got to get out there. I've just
Oh,
been
yeah.
too
My
busy.
good friend Amy Killen lives out there. So
Yeah.
we'll have you visit them. Awesome. 2,000 points so far. Question number 3 is what is your favorite way of unwinding after a long day?
Oh, my instant reaction is to turn on YouTube
Mm.
and I'll start learning something.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll switch to like some comedy guy
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll end up learning something again. So it's kind of like my brain needs a few different, it needs a little bit of variety, and then I calm down, get to bed.
Oh, excellent. Well, if you listen to the Thrive State podcast, you get the same on both things. You don't have to change the channel. I'm kidding. That's question 3 out of 3 so far. Question number 4 is give us one of your hidden talents, people that don't know things.
So my name,
Mhm.
Kashif, my full name, means somebody that discovers something.
Mm,
It also means somebody that sort of connects very easily.
mm.
And I learned genetically, sorry to get back into science, that I actually have this EQ where I can very easily understand what people feel and connect with them. And that's what I was named for.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
Yeah,
your superpower is kind of intuitive, connecting spidey sense here. All right. That's
exactly.
very good. 4 out of 4 thus far. Will you win the 5 to Thrive? That is if you get this question right, which is what's your favorite way to spend a weekend?
Oh, okay. Uh, Usually outdoors, either in the woods or near water.
Oh.
So it's either walking and just listening to the river or the lake splashing, or
Mhm.
going deep into the woods and chasing after a coyote. And I have them in my backyard. So if I walk down the ravine behind my house, there's coyote, deer, turkeys, there's everything. So that's option one.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, that is it. I mean, nature is, one of the prime ways for us to just sort of get back to ourselves. People think that that's a great way of escaping. I find it as a great way of remembering who I am when I'm not plugged into all these different other, stimuli. So
Yeah.
we can hang out together the next time. Look, we've been on, a lot of podcast summit together. You are a thought leader in the space of longevity, of genomics, and you've got a book coming out, The DNA Way: Unlock the Secrets of Your Genes to Reverse Disease, Slow Aging, and Achieve Optimal Wellness. So I have to go back a little bit. How does a kid who couldn't get into McDonald's and does lawnmowers end up in the field of genomics?
So the same way that that happened is I was trying to solve a problem. So I actually ran a PR and marketing company. I helped startup companies grow. That's what I was really good at. I was good at building connections, going back to what my name means, right? Putting people together and finding sort of the hidden value in companies that the founders couldn't see because they were too close,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's what I did. And I got sick. So I got crazy eczema, psoriasis, migraines, gut issues, mood issues like depression, didn't want to get out of bed. So it was through that that I had to discover how to heal myself, because what was happening was 5 different doctors with 5 different pills telling me what my 5 different conditions were called and no answer as to why I had them. And so I had to discover my own genome. And when I realized how powerful it was, I literally handed the keys to my company to my business partner and said, I found what I have to work on. See you later. And I funded it, grew it, did the research around it. And I think it required somebody from the outside, because this science of genomics, this pearl that we have of like, here's your human instruction manual, was
Mm-hmm.
so powerful, but it wasn't being applied because nobody pulled it out of the scientific ivory tower and brought it down to grassroots. Like, how do I use this thing?
Yeah.
Right. I had to do that. And so I built a company around it so that other people could do that. And that's why I wrote the book, for people to understand how easy it is to get into this complex science and apply it.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I want people to truly understand how this information is going to be helpful, because certainly there is the science of epigenetics, the science of our choices, how we approach our life, the energetics that we give ourselves, create this cellular microenvironment, which then speaks to our DNA that basically interacts there to be able to, have better control of our health.
Yeah.
We know some people go, okay, well, I got, genes from mom, genes from dad, but it's truly going to be the epigenetics that are going to determine how these genes are played out. So we have some people going, don't worry about the genetics, but you know what? Knowing something about the genes ahead of time is actually going to be very valuable information. So can you sort that out for some people
Yeah.
that might be thinking, well, you know what? If it's going to be epigenetics anyway, why do I need to know about the genes?
That's a perfect example of where science is getting it right, but they're also getting it wrong when you apply it. They're right in terms of what they're saying in a literal sense, but when you try and apply that in a real life setting, like in a functional medicine clinic, in your clinic, for example, it doesn't work, right? So it's like, hey, you got an 80% chance of Alzheimer's. What does that mean? Is it 80% or 20%? And why the difference between the two? Why isn't it 100% if it's my genome? So the reality is your genes will tell you what to prioritize.
Mm.
Here's the job that your body doesn't do well. Here's the thing, whether it's some detox function or hormone metabolic function or converting, vitamin D2 into D3, there's some job that your body doesn't do well. Now you know what epigenetic choice to make, what environment, nutrition, lifestyle input to add, and what to remove. And if you
Mm.
don't pair those two, you're always going to sit at this, you got an 80% chance of probability type answer versus a certainty of, here's your human instruction manual. This page has a spelling error. Go adopt this habit. And now you won't have the problem. That's what we really need to know.
That's beautiful. We see different, companies come out there speaking of genetic testing, and there are some genes or SNPs that people look at more often, like the
Yeah.
MTHFR or the ApoE ones. Would you say that there are maybe some big key players that probably matter most for people, where a particular habit, supplement, or lifestyle makes a big difference? Would you say there are much more of them that are out there? How much of this stuff is truly important? What are the key players to know, and what are some players that might be nice to know?
So the ones you described are perfect examples of where genetics stops and where functional genomics needs to start. So genetics is, you have the bad version of ApoE, so you have a 6 to 10 times elevated chance of Alzheimer's and dementia,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you still don't know what to do about it.
Mm,
That should be the starting point. And that's where genetics kind of drops things off. And then clinicians like yourself are like, what do I do with this information?
right.
What we need to do is then look at the other systems functionally. What causes Alzheimer's? Okay, there's amyloid black, built up in the brain. So why would somebody have that? Inflammation? Why would they get inflammation? Is it because inhalation based? They don't have the right genes to block toxins from entering through their lungs?
Mm,
Is it gut based that they don't have the right detox functions to prevent toxins coming on with their food entering their gut? Is it insulin based? Maybe their insulin response is completely off at a genetic level, right? Maybe it's hormones. Maybe it's a woman that makes a lot of estrogen and she happens to convert it into a toxic metabolite. So now
mm.
you have, okay, ApoE3. I don't do this job well, which is I don't protect my brain from Alzheimer's well. I don't cause it. I just don't protect it. Something has to cause it, and it's these other things. So that's where you get to, again, back to that probability versus certainty. And MTHFR is another example. A lot of clinicians like, okay, methylation, MTHFR, there's one gene. Meanwhile, there's a whole cascade. There's this baton pass of various steps that happen. And MTHFR is like the starring character. It's the one that's published and studied the most, so it's spoken of the most. But if your MTHR is off, you don't yet know what to do about it unless you look upstream and downstream of what all those other jobs are doing. Do I need B12? Do I need sublingual B12 under my tongue? Do I need methylcobalamin B12 or adenosyl B12? Do I need folic acid or folinic acid? So all these other genes in the cascade inform precisely what to do. And so it's no longer, let's try this, let's try that. No, your genome's prescribing exactly what you need.
Yeah, I find it truly amazing just the intelligence that's there. Um, one of the things when I talk about in terms of purpose, and how people find their purpose is there's also an innate version of you, I think, that puts you in states of levity, joy, excitement, something that lights you up.
Yeah.
And I think it's encoded in your DNA and it's already in there. And for you to step into that really allows you to activate that part of yourself the best. Now, we're approaching, we're in May. Your book comes out May 16th, and May is Mental Health Month.
Yeah.
Is there anything in terms of the genome that is new, exciting, that we should be aware of? That testing the genome would be good, but also maybe give us some solutions if we happen to have mental health issues that we can't pinpoint why that might be. This episode of the Thrive State podcast is brought to you by the Thrive State Accelerator. The Thrive State Accelerator is actually a home course that I developed using the exact same techniques I work with my celebrity clients, CEOs, and executives on how to get them to the Thrive State. The Thrive State Accelerator teaches you how to master your 7 bioenergetic elements. That's sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, our thoughts and mindset, as well as purpose. In this Thrive State Accelerator, you're also going to get a bonus module on optimization. That's how I talk about supplementation, peptides, all the optimization techniques I use with my clients to get them to the Thrive State. Now, for some of you who are just joining us for the first time, you guys might be wondering, what is the Thrive State? Well, the Thrive State is actually the energy, the epigenetic environment we give to ourselves, telling our DNA how to act and how to respond. And if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, if we can master these 7 bioenergetic elements, our ability to have those 3 things that we just said, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, is at its greatest. And it also prevents you from getting chronic symptoms like brain fog, being overweight, feeling sluggish, acne, pain, all these chronic symptoms, as well as preventing you from getting chronic disease. So getting to that Thrive State is really getting to that state to master being that very best version of yourself so you could show up for you, for your family, for your business, everything that's important to you. So go ahead, check it out right now at kienvu.com/accelerator and use coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now back to the podcast.
So this, I would say, at a personal level, is the thing that I contributed the most. Unintentionally, by the way. I didn't claim to be a scientist or a researcher. I was building the business. But in part of building it, I wanted to be hands-on and learn it and be able to speak to it, and also use it for myself and my family and my friends. So the unique research model we had was we actually clinically reviewed all of our research patients. We actually sat there like this, whether it's a single phone call or many, many months of follow-up, we treated them like patients and we helped them through their journey, which means we also documented their behavior, their personality, how they reacted, how they burnt out, procrastinated, undercomplied, overcomplied. And we paired that with their genetic profile. So I'm now at the point where if I have your DNA, I don't ever need to talk to you to understand your personality to a T. I can tell you if you should be an accountant, if you should be an entrepreneur. I can tell you if you use words like anxiety and depression and why you don't have to. And let's use that as an example. So this big word of anxiety, there's neurochemicals like serotonin and dopamine that are tied to it to some degree, but we don't know how. So if you bind, I should say, too much dopamine, which is genetically driven, it's very easy for you to experience pleasure and reward. You're just constantly experiencing it. So you're not used to feeling bad. You're not used to things not being satisfying. So when the good is taken away from you, for example, something closes, COVID lockdown, can't see anybody, you're not used to that bottom feeling. Acute anxiety response. I can't get out of bed, right? Then there's the opposite person who has very low dopamine receptors, like myself, who is used to the world sucks, nothing feels good, I can't get satisfied. So they have more of a chronic, ongoing, everyday anxiety because nothing is satisfying, right? Now you add into that mixed serotonin, and that can drive it to be a more high functioning. It drives you towards goals and rewards, or can be more recessive, like I need to stay home, I don't want to talk to anybody. So we can really fine tune who you are. And the beautiful thing about all this, unless it's an innate chemical imbalance issue, which is a very small part of the mental health we deal with today, most of it is chronic and developed, right? You don't have to have it. It's a question of context, meaning you are wired to be a warrior because you don't experience dopamine, you have a serotonin dysregulation, so you're like high functioning anxiety, drive, and you're working 9 to 5 in an office. Yeah, you're going to suffer depression because you're not getting satisfaction, right? Or you're wired to experience and bind emotional stimulus. You're much more likely to remember and recall the bad feelings. So you're wired for PTSD and you're a soldier on the front lines. That's not going to work out too well, right? So now all of a sudden that thing that we've been given, that mental wiring, can either be your superpower or it can be your kryptonite based on the context you're in. And this is the thing that I said that was my learning, because after interviewing these hundreds and hundreds of people, I started to see over and over again the thing that they complained about. If you just shift their reality to what they were actually wired for, they thrive. They get into their thrive state, right? As opposed to their crash state, which is what they were coming from because they were misaligned in context. So that was a big knowledge, big sort of learning curve for us.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And I can almost sort of take a personal note. When I was working full time, in the hospital system,
Yeah.
I found myself sort of just not being fulfilled and
Yeah.
and kind of depressed, But taking the risk and going off and doing things and doing media and hanging out with people like you and shoving liposomal vitamin D up your mouth has really caused me to light up.
Yeah.
So that's a very amazing thing that now what is deemed maybe some emotions that are unpleasant could be related to sort of the environment that we're in. Can you, maybe using those two examples that you shared right there, what type of environment would you say that earlier person that is the go kind of person, and then the other one you mentioned, what shifts have you noticed allows them to shift the context of how they're feeling so that it's more aligned with who they were designed to be?
So I'll use myself as an example,
Yeah.
right? My dopamine pathway looks like this. The first step in pleasure or reward, and dopamine powers both,
Yeah.
is anticipation. You know it's coming, so I can smell that tasty pizza, right? So the dopamine starts flowing. Then there's the moment, so you bind the dopamine and you experience the pleasure reward.
Yeah.
Then there's the clearance. You have to get back to normal. And so eventually some proteins and chemicals come in and get rid of the dopamine, bring you back to normal. So the way my body does that is the density of my receptors is the absolute minimum possible. So the anticipation kind of doesn't happen, and the moment is just not enough. I'm not getting what I need to get out of it.
Mm.
Then the breakdown, the metabolic pathway that breaks the dopamine down, and the clearance, kind of the broom that sweeps it up, are super, super fast. The fastest they could possibly be. So I'm feeling it way down here, and it's gone before it even started. So what are the potential outcomes for me? Depression, because everything sucks, right? Addiction, because I find something pleasurable and I go down that route and I just keep going and going and going because it's never, I can't get no satisfaction. It's just
Mm.
constant, right? Or achievement, because dopamine also powers reward.
Mhm.
Ultimately, both of these things, pleasure and reward, equal satisfaction, and you only need one of them to get there, right?
Mm.
So I've experienced all three of these things in different contexts.
Yeah.
The context drove the outcome. So what I learned, which we now can teach to people, is you don't need both. So if you're stuck in depression or pleasure, and your depression comes from lack of pleasure, let's wire you for reward. Let's give you a micro reward. Just move something on your table. Just set an alarm, right? And get used to achieving little rewards, and then a
Mm.
slightly bigger reward, a slightly bigger reward. And all of a sudden you rewire your brain, which is what I did for myself,
Mm.
to get your satisfaction from reward. And when you do that, it is much more satisfying than it is getting it from pleasure. Because pleasure, there's other things, taste and other things you have to, it's not always as satisfying as it can be, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where I feel now. And the easiest way to put it, do you know Joe Polish?
Yeah,
He runs
yeah,
the
yeah,
GN.
yeah. Phil, a good
So
friend. Um,
yeah, so he was on stage once, and somebody asked him about fasting, right? And he said, there's no food that tastes as good as the way I feel. Right. And he was
mm.
rubbing his abs as he was saying that. Right. So that sense of reward from achieving and constant micro achievements, you can rewire your brain for that. And that's just one small example of just this pleasure reward pathway. Name a mood and behavior issue. We can
Mhm.
speak to it at that level. How do you rewire and adjust and get the better outcome?
That's pretty amazing there. And we only brought up one thing, and I just brought up mental health only because we are now in Mental Health Month. But you could just see how knowing your genome will give you a better sense and context of why your current results might be a particular way based on how you were made up. And I could extend mental health into physical health, into sleep, into weight issues and things like that. Basically, our entire phenotype is a direct interplay of how our genotype is interacting with its environment.
That's right on. That's exactly it. You are a combination of your genes and plus the choices you make.
Absolutely. And so I would imagine, and I did get a report because I did do this test, and so you know me better than I know myself, so to speak. Um, you get all this data, right? At what point would you say that the average person who gets the data will actually know the steps that they could best take to change their life, or does it become overwhelming because there might be a little too much to take on?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a few different people that would use this tool. There's the person that has a problem. You
Mhm.
know, my mom had breast cancer. I don't want it. I'm losing my hair. I can't figure it out. There's something to fix. And the purpose of how you use the tool isn't to go look for the hair gene or the breast cancer gene. That's genetics, which I don't think is an efficient way to do it.
Right.
It's to look at the red flags. What jobs, the first thing I said, what jobs does my body not do well? How is that relevant to this problem I'm trying to solve?
Mm.
So if it is breast cancer, for example, and I happen to see a red flag in my detox pathways, that's usually not a breast cancer cause, but am I not detoxifying my estrogen metabolites? Am I not detoxifying the chemicals that I breathe in? I work at a golf course and I'm breathing them every day, and they're hormone mimicking and disrupting, right? So you can take that thing, that red flag in your DNA, and then interpret it for your problem. So that's one person. The second person is I'm you, right? I look like a supermodel, but I think that maybe I could look like a super duper model, right? How much better can it get?
Mhm.
So it's just human optimization. Just tell me what else I can do. And that's the person that's going through the entire report beginning to end, right?
Yeah.
Looking for every little nuance. And that takes time. It's a lot of data, right? It's 7 systems, each one has micro reports. And so what we did was we built this AI tool that's in the report
Mm.
to speak your genome to you, to guide you through. So there's reports that speak to anxiety and all these other issues. Then there's here's your genes, as if a PhD is sitting there with you, and here's a gene, here's what it does, here's what version you have, here's what it means. And that helps you understand how to use the entire report and maybe save some time not having to dig through everything, right?
Mhm.
Then the third person we deal with is like, we're dealing with a lot of clinicians and a lot of functional medicine type people that have been failed by every other tool or process they've been through.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't understand why nobody knows what's wrong with me. So they don't even know what the problem is yet, right? I feel like this, I can't get out of bed, I'm depressed, I'm like whatever, and nobody knows how to fix it. So that detective work that can be done through genetics is going back to that very first question, what job is your body not doing well? And now let's figure out. So they may not, like the breast cancer patient knows what they have, the hair loss person knows what they have, the migraine person knows. This person is like, I'm just screwed up, I can't go to work, I don't know what's going on, right? Some people say it's Lyme disease, some people say it's MS, but no, there's nothing fixing me, right? So that's the person where we feel the most, call it reward on our end,
Yeah.
where they just everything has failed them. Every doctor, they spent their life savings trying to figure something out, and all of a sudden there's this one little nuance that nobody could see, and that changed everything, right? And we get a lot of those as well.
That's amazing. The book is basically out. The DNA way. Is it? Did you write it for the everyday person to understand the power of knowing their genome, or did you write it for scientists and physicians to let them know basically what to do with that information once they have it?
My intention of writing this book was to let everybody know that this is a tool that should be in their toolkit, even though they didn't know that it could be, right?
Mm,
So I wrote it in the way that I needed to read it
yeah.
when I was the layman on day one. And I literally go through my own personal genetic report and tell everybody how I fixed all my problems using my genetic, like what were the recommendations, what did I actually do, that journey I went through for a couple of years. And it makes it so easy to understand whether you have your genetic data or not, you at least can start thinking about your health in that way and start to recognize things that maybe you didn't think about before, right? So
Mm.
that was my whole intention, to take this thing that seemed like out of reach science that and make it so easy to use. That was the key.
That's beautiful. And that's why you look like a super duper model right now. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you'll just see how glowing this guy really is. Well, congratulations, my friend. I'm so super happy for you. I know we're both going to be speaking at a lot of different conferences together this year, sharing the stage, and I can't wait for that. But how do people, get a copy of this book, know more about you and more about the DNA company?
Sure. So the DNAway.com is where the book is, right? It's everywhere. I mean, we worked with Hay House to publish it. That was another story on its own. We're going to need another half an hour for that. So go to the DNAway.com. That's where the book is. If you go there, there's some extras that are, I think we're hosting some live events and stuff for people that have the book. It's going to be a lot of fun for people. Uh, the DNAcompany.com is where the test is available. It's called the 360. When you get it, if you need more support, some people do. We have functional genomics practitioners that can support people like yourself. Like they can bring it back to you. Like there's not a lot of clinicians that have your knowledge that can actually implement this stuff.
Yeah.
So bringing it to you, and it just makes that process so much better, right? Um, and we also host education webinars, trainings for people that just want to dive deeper into topics using their genome. And the last thing I would say is you are joining us on our podcast pretty soon, right?
Happy to do so, my friend.
Yeah, we're also, I think we're recording in a couple weeks, so that should be fun. So yeah, so people want to learn more about how we think about all these problems that everyone's dealing with. It's called the Unpilled Podcast, and people can it's just a tool for people to learn. You know.
That's awesome. I love, seeing you more on stages. Didn't realize what a sense of humor that you had, but love diving into the quirks. Congratulations with all the success. Now, with everything that you've done in the past, everything you've known, in the biohacking world, everything in the science of longevity, all the way up into the little tiny moments in life that you find very valuable and you connect with. What has been your best medicine?
Wow. Okay, so my best medicine, am I allowed to say two?
Yeah, give us two. We want it.
So one thing that was a foundation of everything that I didn't even think about was sleep.
Yeah.
And you'll hear that from everybody. But I wasn't intentionally trying to fix my sleep. It actually happened by mistake. So I had a couple kids and I started sleeping in my own room because the kids wanted to sleep with mama.
Mm,
And my life changed. And I didn't understand how much I was hurting myself by not sleeping properly.
wow.
So, and I also learned the genetics of sleep, and I can't sleep is too general of an answer. We can get very specific in terms
Yeah.
of I can't fall asleep. I fall asleep, but I kind of wake up in the middle of the night. I sleep through the night, but I wake up not so rested. Genetically, those are very different things, and we know how to solve them uniquely for each one of those things. So I had more the middle, that I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm screwed up, stuck. So I fixed that, changed my life. The second big one, which was a sleeper, which I did fix. So sleep was unintentional. This one was very intentional. Environmental health, this gray area that isn't really spoken of and it's not considered a threat, but everything you breathe and you're exposed to, whether it's your pesticides in your lawn, your cleaning chemicals on your desk, your mattress, the off-gassing of your memory foam, all of this stuff, this constant drip of environmental toxins and the burden that we have, um, I'm missing some key genes that are supposed to support your body from dealing with those, and I literally don't do those jobs, so it was even worse for me, and that's
Wow.
why I had such bad migraines from the inflammation. But that was a big one for me, understanding the reality of this threat we live in. And I'll finish by telling you this: our DNA is 250,000 years old, right? So the people who we are walking around this planet today are wired for habits of people of 250,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Our industrialized reality
Hmm.
is what, like less than 100 years old, the chemical and food and all the nonsense that we now have to expose ourselves to. So we are not designed for this. And this is why we have a $4 trillion healthcare budget,
Yeah.
right? And everyone is sick and obese and metabolically unsound. And so it's understanding that as soon as you get out the door, even in the door, whatever's in your house, it's all a threat. You have to upregulate your genetic capacity with the right supplementation and keep reducing the threat by getting rid of stuff.
Mm, so good. Sounds like both of those included. I mean, the DNA is basically, could be the medicine that we're all looking for, remembering who we are and what we're built for. So thank
Yeah,
you for reminding us of that, my friend. I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Congratulations on the book, my friend. And thank you for being on the Thrive State podcast.
pleasure. Good seeing you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if this podcast is bringing a lot of value to you, if you find that your life is just improving with this podcast, that your life is getting to the next level, please consider supporting it. And here's a few ways you can do so. You can do so by liking this video and commenting on this video, and also sharing this video with your friends and family. Another thing you can do is go to ratethispodcast.com/ThriveState. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review there. It will really, really help this show grow. And this will give me more time so that I could actually give more content to you, just like you got in this episode. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book, Thrive State, your blueprint for optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, you can pick it up now. It became a #1 new release in longevity. Go to thrivestatebook.com. And if you enjoy the book, please consider leaving us a review as well. And the last thing you can do, if you're liking everything here and you want to work more closely with me as well as my team to get you into the Thrive State, go to kienvu.com/accelerator and consider joining the home course, the Thrive State Accelerator. It's really the course that I use. It's the concepts that I use personally when I work with CEOs, celebrities, and my high-profile clients to get them to the Thrive State. Again, the Thrive State Accelerator at kienvu.com/accelerator. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want you to save 25% by using the coupon code podcast25. I hope we continue to give value to you. And remember always, you are your best medicine.